Valley Church. Hope for those who have given up on church.
This program was brought to you by you, the friends and partners of Freedom Valley Church. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear from you throughout the broadcast today. And my favorite way is by email, g@freedomvalley.org. That's my email address, just the letter g@freedomvalley.org. You can reach me on Facebook, Gerry Stoltzfoos, or watch this later again on the YouTube channel, which is also titled Gerry Stoltzfoos. That would be great. We're doing a teaching series right now called Faith Is. It is the kernel to life. Faith is that which creates life from the inside out. And I hope you can stay with me for this series. I promise you this, if you do, your life will not be the way it was when you started out, because this generates every other good thing out of it. Can't wait to share this with you. Thank you for being with me on this part of the series. So welcome back to our Faith Is series, where we're talking specifically about the definition and the power of faith. This comes from a teaching in Hebrews 11, and I'm giving the TV audience a little special edition here that our church family is not actually getting, because the way our scheduling works here. I want you to capture a piece of this. If you've been with me a little while on the TV show, and I'm getting growing amounts of feedback suggesting that many of you are, then you've heard me repeatedly talk about how Romans 12 teaches us that faith ought to be how we measure our own value to the planet. I want to teach specifically on that today, to cap off this teaching series. Now, we've been in Hebrews 11, where Hebrews 11 talks specifically about what faith is, gives us a definition of faith. It's very hard to define without Hebrews 11, but it gives us a definite definition that will allow you to unpack and understand and work within faith. It might be surprising to you. Verse 1 of Hebrews 11 says, faith is confidence. And it's confidence in the hope that we have of what God is going to do in our lives, of things we have not yet seen. So he says it comes through understanding, and by understanding how God created through he imagined, he spoke, he realized, and that it is fed by motivation of reward. That is, the motivation that God will reward people of faith is what causes us to do faith-filled, difficult things, because faith is almost always, by definition, a difficult period between the dream and the reality of the dream. And we talked last week about how faith-filled people are builders. They're not waiting on an explosive one-day event or some magic to happen, but they build life by life, day after day. They build a relationship. They build their health. They build what God has given them in all the ways that he has given it to them. Today I want to talk to you about a faith is the measurement of value to your life, to who you are, and how people around you will value you. This is a huge and explosive thought. I have people sometimes say that they believe that we should be valued just because we're human, that humans have unique value, and of course there is some truth to that. However, Romans 12, the Holy Spirit uses the Apostle Paul to teach us something about how life becomes valuable to us, and how we will value each other, and also how you can become valuable to your world through faith. So I want to read Romans 12 with you, and then in the coming weeks we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about legends, some of the great legends of Hebrews 11, and how the legend of their lives is still affecting how we look at the world today and what we believe about the world today. And we want to just unpack that and enjoy that and spend some time building that in ourselves. You're going to hear from some of my partners over the next couple of weeks. I'm very excited about that. These are some men and women who are legends in my mind, strong and powerful in leadership because what they believe in faith. And they're going to demonstrate and teach what God is showing them about legends as well. So if you have your Bible or a device, I always read my Bible these days on my phone or on my tablet or on some device. Go to Romans chapter 12, and if you want to be right there with me, I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. I love the Bible app, by the way, the gift that lifechurch.tv gave the body of Christ. That's what I use most of the time. But use whatever works for you. Romans chapter 12, we're going to read parts of the first 4 verses. It says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he's done for you. Let them, your bodies, be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him." Worship isn't songs. Songs can be used, but worship is not songs or music alone. Worship is how you treat yourself. That's really key in this process. Don't copy, this is verse 2, the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think of yourself better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us. Now I want to talk a little bit about what he's saying here when he says we ought to measure ourselves by the faith God has given us. If you've been with me for a few months, I referenced this verse a few months ago talking about taking a spiritual selfie, a way of looking at yourself in a mirror, a way of seeing yourself for who you really are. That's what this verse is talking about. When it comes to faith, it's probably the most beautiful and proper way to encapsulate what we've been talking about in the faith series, because here he says that how much faith we have and how we work in faith is our direct measurement of value to the planet, to ourselves, to our families, to other people around us. That's the real value, and it is measurable. That's why he says to measure yourself by it. So a little time thinking about this, about how I stack up, because this is on me. This is not the genes I was born with, nor is it the environment I was in, but it's the thoughts that I choose to give free rein in my body, to let course through my mind, to act out in my reality, that changes the reality around me and causes it to bend around those thoughts. That's incredibly powerful. And you can measure it. Here's what he says about measuring it. He says, first of all, I want you to notice that he says, measure yourself. This is not for you to measure somebody else or for other people to measure you, but this is the way that you take your own spiritual selfie or your own spiritual picture of what you really are from the inside out. We project from the inside out. People that are not naturally well endowed with good looks can be incredibly beautiful because of what they project from the inside out. And people who would naturally be endowed with good looks can be not very beautiful based on what they project from the inside out. I've watched with great sadness over 30 years of ministry some very, very good-looking young people within 5 years go from being incredibly beautiful or handsome to looking like my cowboy friend's kid about being rode hard and put away wet. Life has been very hard on them in a very short time because of choices they made. And coming from the inside out is an ugliness that obscures and mars everything else. And you can't hide behind any amount of clothing or makeup. It exudes. Faith on the inside does something else. It creates a beauty that causes us to look at people who would not outside ordinarily be beautiful and yet wish we looked more like them. And so when it says measure yourself by the faith God has given us, he's first of all saying, listen, there is a specific way to look at yourself to know how you're doing. And it has to do with your confidence in the future, because when he says measure yourself by the faith, remember Hebrews 11 says, now faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. So you can't feel confident about yourself. By the way, I love the studies that have said that the thing we find most attractive about somebody of the opposite gender, say when we're looking for a husband or a wife, the thing we find most attractive across the board is not features, it's confidence. A person that projects confidence. Now, if somebody's been told thousands of times they're good looking, they tend to project that in their confidence. But the other thing is also true. People that tend to project confidence tend to be good looking even if they don't have the natural features for it. So Hebrews tells us that when you project, that faith is confidence. And here it can be measured. You can measure the confidence in yourself by how much faith God has given you. The way you stack up and your value to your family, your sense of value to yourself, your sense of value to your children, to the world around you, is directly connected to your plans to interact with the planet, your plans to build a future. Remember, faith is building. We talked about it last week. By faith, Noah built. He didn't wish for, he didn't hope for, and he didn't play the lottery. He built. That is, he aggressively interacted with life in incremental steps to move forward until that great flood came and he had built an ark to save his family. He tried to save many others, but they didn't listen, as indicated by the scriptural record as well. But my measurement of myself, your measurement of yourself, is directly connected to the plans that you have built. Not the wishes and hopes, but the plans. So to do a spiritual EKG on yourself, what are you planning for this year, or next year, or the year after that, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now? Your value is directly connected to those plans. Over the Faith Is series, I've been asking Freedom Valley people, and I want to suggest the same to those of you in the television audience. I've said, write me a quick and a concise email on your plans for your future. Because can I tell you that if you have plans for your future, my guess is that you're in 2%. The top 2% of the church audience, and you're carrying the other 98%. That is, not many of us have plans. Some of us have idle wishes. I wish I could lose weight. I wish I could be healthier. I wish I could have better relationships. I wish life wouldn't be so hard. I wish I had a great future. But you know what? Wishing does not necessarily produce anything. Faith, the word, the interchangeable word with faith is plans. Because faith really, you can't have confidence in a wish. All it is vapor. But a wish becomes plans whenever you start putting in motion something you can do toward that preferable future that you have. And your value will actually be measured by how developed those plans are. I love the Old Testament prophet Habakkuk. I like to call him Habakkuk, but however you pronounce it. That little book, you can read it in about 10 minutes, is about an angry prophet, I think. At least that's the way I read it. It says he started saying to God, God, why is my world so evil and disgusting and hateful? I'll identify with that. Some days I get so mad at what humans do to each other, what we are doing, and how hard it is to stop it and make it better. If you've seen the recent school shootings and the wars that are going on and the ugliness of famine when other parts of the world are throwing away food they have in too much abundance, it's awful. It's not okay. And in the midst of that, if you feel angry, sometimes I say to God, God, why don't you fix it? And God's response is, wait a minute, Gerry, I put humans here to fix it. So what are you doing about it? So God's response to Habakkuk is, listen, I'll use anybody with vision, even evil people. The world has got to have some kind of vision. What about yours? Write down your vision, he says to the prophet, and make it plain. That is, work on it. Develop it. Because people who just read vision run with it. I'll get people to run with your vision if you write it. That's why I wrote the book 83 Lost Sheep. It's about my vision to plant 1,000 churches all over the world before I retire 30 years from now. I want to plant churches, a lot of churches, life-giving churches, world-changing churches. I want to engender a church planting movement or be part of what is happening like that around the world. I've written that out because people, I'm hearing now from people who've gotten the book 83 Lost Sheep, started reading it, got inspired, and planted a church. We have about 15 such of the 80-some churches we've planted. About 15 of them have been people who I didn't meet at all until somebody handed them a copy of 83 Lost Sheep. They read the vision. The vision got a hold of them. They were caused to run with it. So if you had to measure yourself by your plans for the future, how would you measure up? Do you have real plans or idle wishes? That's what he's saying, first of all. And he says then, measure yourself by the faith plan God has given you. What he's talking about here is that we go from wish, we go from hope to reality through the steps that we can take. Now, we can't take all the steps. God steps in when we do our best. The Bible's full of those stories. Last week I told you the story of Jonathan, and he was the king's son who started a war, and God didn't even start helping until they'd been into the battle for a while. Jonathan just said, somebody got to stop the bad guys. And they're just getting worse and worse, and all we're doing is sitting back and watching. And when he started, after a while, God stepped in. In other words, God is saying, look, your faith plan has got to find some action somewhere, because the Apostle James was saying, hey, from what I got from Jesus teaching about faith, listen, faith without works is dead. If it doesn't have some way of working itself out, it's dead. So the faith plan has to be, what are you going to work in your future? Because I can tell you this, if you don't have a faith plan, you're in depression and you're free falling. And there's not enough experiences, there's not enough of stroking your flesh in some way or another for you to feel okay about life. There's not enough of drugs for you to take. There's not enough of highs for you to have. There's not enough alcohol for you to drink to feel okay about life if you don't have a plan. On the other hand, the more of a plan that you have, just follow that through for a minute. The more of a plan that you have, the more the faith plan is developed, the more you will measure yourself well, develop confidence in your future, and begin building toward it. What would you like to build? What would you like to build? Listen, I've gotten about 80 of these so far from my church family, of people who said, here's some things I'd like to do with the next 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years of my life. Here's some things I'd like to do. I have folks in the church who want to build a medical clinic in a foreign country to help people in extreme poverty. I have folks in the church who are planning to start businesses to make jobs for other people. I have folks who have written me in this Faith Plan series who have a plan to start ways to research medical issues that nobody else has done yet. Nobody else has researched yet. There are a lot of plans, but if we don't start somewhere with a plan, we're not going anywhere with our lives. So measure yourself by the faith plan, because confidence grows with a plan, because God uses a plan. God doesn't necessarily use your wishes. You can lose weight. You can get a better job. You can find a soulmate. You can leave a legacy. But none of those are done accidentally and done well, sustainably. They're done with a plan that changes or has enough nuances in it to adapt to the future. And I want you to notice that it says you measure yourself by the faith God has given you. Now, if you're tempted at this point to say, well, if it's the faith God has given you, God just hasn't given me much faith. Listen, this is one of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. But Jesus taught it this way. He said, stop feeling like such a victim. He said, let me explain this to you. This is Matthew 25 if you want to look it up. There's a rich man who had managers managing parts of his business. And he said, look, I need to take off for a little while and get some things done. I want to put you in charge of divisions of my business, and I'm going to come back and find out how you did. So he comes back and he says to the one guy, how'd you do? And the guy says, look, man, I doubled what you gave me. There's double as much here as when you left. And the man says, wow, way to go. I'm promoting you in a big way. Second guy, same thing. Third guy says, oh, I was scared. I didn't do anything. I just protected what I had. So here you go. He judged the third guy severely, promoted the first two. And what Jesus is teaching us here is that God always gives in accordance with our stewardship. That is, if I do well with what God has given me now, it can be very little, but it can very quickly become much more if I'm doing well with what I've been given. Maybe I have been given a family that doesn't have much relationship left. Maybe it doesn't have much health in its heritage. But if I do a lot with what I've been given, God gives back tens or hundreds or thousands of times more when I've been good with what I've already been given. Please follow that, because when he says you should measure yourself by the faith God has given you, God always gives his stuff to people who have been good stewards with what he's already given. That's the plan Jesus was teaching us in Matthew 25. So he's saying you have a way to work with God in getting more faith. Romans 12 also indicates that there are people who have the gift of faith. Listen, if you don't feel like you have much faith, you can partner up with somebody who has the gift. You know them all around. These are can-do people with a can-do attitude. I've often heard America described as the can-do nation. Well, let me tell you this. If it is a can-do nation, that's faith-filled nation. That's a nation that says, by the grace of God, we believe confidently. We hope for things that haven't yet occurred. And there is incredible strength in that. So let me stir that up here in central Pennsylvania. Central Pennsylvania can once again become aflame and impassioned as the powerhouse of this nation, the engine that drives this nation, the keystone to our country. It can be by men and women here who believe God in faith that God has called me to be a generator of wealth, of health, of ability, of opportunity. I can generate those things here because God gave me a little bit of faith, and as I'm faithful with the little bit He's given me, He will give me more. That's how He always works. So maybe you have one of those areas in your life where you're wishing your life was not as little as it is today. Our temptation is to get angry at the things around us, to become envious of other people who are being paid more, or other families that have more going for them, or other people who are healthier than we are. Listen, don't waste energy being envious. Envy is a sin because it destroys us from the inside out in building faith plans for ourselves. All it does is make us more of a victim. This is to unvictimize ourselves by causing us to believe that God will give me more faith if I use what I have. You have been given faith already. Watching this program, faith is growing in you. And if you start using and developing what little faith you have, I've had people say to me, I'm not much of a visionary. I don't have the gift of vision. I don't see the gift of vision in the Word of God exactly. I believe it's faith. Very pure and simple. It's the ability to believe that my future could be great and that I have a role in doing something to make it great, and to unapologetically go after that and believe God that He can use little old me to accomplish things beyond what I ever asked for or thought of. Yet, God can do that in me. He will do that in me and through me and around me and in spite of me if I allow Him to. That's what we're going to ask God to do over these next few moments. The faith that God has given you is what God will work in you. So what I want to encourage you and my television audience to do is start building a plan right now. What do you want to do with your life? Somebody said, I don't know what it is that I want to do. Some of us have to decide. We just have to decide on something. If God didn't spell out a vision for you, the earth is wide open to you. Everything but sin is available. And sin is so that it's such a small spectrum of things compared to the open doors God has placed in front of you. Pick something. Pick anything. Choose to be a person of faith, of believing that God can use you. Choose not to give yourself an excuse that you're not a visionary, and become one. Because vision is faith, and faith is a vision. You can become somebody who grows in the ability to imagine the future and to build powerfully toward it. Send me a copy of just with a summary of what you want God to do with your life over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, and I'll pray with you about it. Thank you so much for being part of this today.
I had hit a very low point in my life. My life was just a train wreck. I did not have God in my life. I left the church at age 18, desperately wanted to come into a church. I had come into Freedom Valley, and I had never prayed before, never read the Bible. I walked in the door, and Vaughn had seen me. And I asked God on the way in, whatever happens, please don't let me leave, because I need you, because I've been here before and I leave. And he answered that prayer. Vaughn came up to me to talk to me. I just laid it out. I said, Vaughn, I don't know how to pray. I don't know about God. I want to be a Christian, and I have no idea what that means, but I need God and I need Jesus in my life. And he took me upstairs and asked me if I'd mind praying, and any other time I would have been uncomfortable with that. I wasn't. And he took me into the sanctuary and said, my preference would be to be in the 9:15 service. Would you mind being with me? And everything that happened kept me there. And I've been here ever since. I took all the core classes immediately. Every sermon that Pastor Gerry gave, he started his 5-step teaching program series on how to achieve joy, which I never even knew what joy was. And I would come to church, listen to them, absorb it, and I'd go make observations and apply it. And I just started to do these things. I am a guy, but I do read the installation instructions and modeling instructions on stuff. It's my job, and I'm wired that way. So things make sense if you follow procedures and it works, and God worked with me. I mean, everything I did worked immediately, and it just erased a fallacy that I had in my head about, boy, it's going to take me forever to get a hold of this and wrap my head around it. By the time I got done with the fifth sermon in Gerry's Joy, I went out, did it, everything came together, and I had joy. I had never felt that, and just emotions were just running wild within me. I started out trying to figure out how I could tithe. I'm in the bankruptcy court right now. That was part of the train wreck I had, and I just did it on faith. I heard Gerry talk about, you jump in and you leave things to God. All of a sudden, I asked for wisdom on how to do that, and I started to learn ways to save money, and I didn't even feel that. So when we had the next campaign come up, again, I thought, I don't know where this is going to come from, but I was running up to the altar, I think, before anybody got done talking about it, and I pledged more money. Gerry came back from his sabbatical, and I'd asked him if I could talk to him about what was going on with me. And during that conversation, I told him I wanted to work for God, and that also coincided with him talking about the next campaign. And he mentioned 55,857 people within a 20-minute drive of our church that claimed they were unclaimed by a church. And that blew me away. I thought, when I was a kid, if somebody came and asked me to go to church, I wouldn't have went. And I was so flabbergasted, because my grandmother taught me, if you ever want to do something, just ask somebody. The worst that you're going to get is right where you're at now, so there's no big deal. And I thought, I got to do something. If I feel this good, there has to be some way that I can go out with my limited knowledge right now and just talk to people about God and what He's doing to me in my life. And that's when Gerry asked me about Hope for the City, and I didn't even hesitate. I thought, yeah, there it is. A grand stage to go talk to a lot of people about how I feel. And that was connected me to Hope for the City, and I became passionate for God. I have joy now. I don't make any more money than I did, but I have money. If I tried to not do something for God, I would have a hard time with that, just because that's where my heart is. It's been 120 miles an hour with no brakes ever since, and there's no looking back, just ahead.
Thank you for being with me today on Faith Is. I believe this has the potential of bringing radical, powerful changes, the kind of changes you like to your life. Not promising you life will be easier, just that God will move through you to create a better life for all of us if you have this kind of understanding going on inside of you. Share this with your friends. Tell them to get on the youtube.com/Gerry Stoltzfoos channel and share it with them. Share it by what your life is becoming. And thank you for watching today. I'd love to hear from you. g@freedomvalley.org or on my Facebook, facebook.com/Gerry Stoltzfoos will get you there. Love to hear from you however you do it. Thanks for watching.